I heard it with my own ears, clear as the bell that used to ring for supper at my mother's house. It was a Saturday in late July. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of my hickory smoke, a smell I'd spent 50 years perfecting. My son, Daniel, was hosting. Or rather, his wife Sarah was hosting, and Daniel was paying for it. That's how it seemed to work with them. I was sitting in one of those flimsy aluminum lawn chairs they favor, the kind that feels like it's moments from surrendering to gravity. My own chair, a sturdy old wooden one with a faded floral cushion my late Mary stitched herself, was in the garage. They told me it didn't match the new patio set. I was watching my grandson, Marcus, trying to teach his little sister how to throw a softball. He was patient with her, a good boy. He had my Mary's eyes. The conversation drifted over from the deck, where Daniel and Sarah were standing with some of their friends, people with soft hands and loud, easy laughter. I wasn't meant to hear it. I've learned over the years that much of what is said about me is not meant for me to hear. One of Sarah's friends, a woman in a bright yellow dress, asked Daniel something about his childhood. "Oh, you have to get his dad to tell you some stories," she'd said, gesturing vaguely in my direction with her wine glass. "He's from a different time," I heard Sarah's sigh. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of an inconvenience. "Honestly, Brenda, don't get him started," Sarah said. Her voice was light, but it had an edge like broken glass. "We've heard them all 1,000 times. The Great Migration, the Army, the first car he ever fixed. It's a lot." Then came the words from my son. "My only son." "Yeah," Daniel said, and I heard him chuckle. It was a weak sound, a sound trying to curry favor. "Your stories about the old days don't matter now." "Pop, Pop," he didn't say it to me. He said about me, as if I were a piece of furniture, a relic. "Pop, Pop." He hadn't called me Dad in 15 years. Something inside me didn't break. No, it was colder than that. It was a click, like a deadbolt sliding into place. My hands, resting on my knees, didn't tremble. I watched them. They were steady. The skin was dark and mapped with the lines of a life spent working, building things, fixing things, holding my wife, holding my son. These hands had changed his diapers. They'd taught him how to grip a hammer, how to bait a hook. They'd held him steady on his first two-wheel bicycle. And now, they didn't matter. The stories they held didn't matter. I watched Marcus for another minute. He finally got his sister to toss the ball in a clumsy arc. He cheered for her, a pure, uncomplicated sound. I stood up from the flimsy chair. It groaned in protest. No one on the deck noticed. They were laughing at some other joke now. I walked over to the grill. My grill. I'd brought it myself. It was an old, barrel-shaped thing, seasoned with decades of smoke. The ribs inside were just about ready. The sauce, my sauce, was caramelizing on the surface. The recipe was my father's, with a few additions of my own. A story in itself. A story that didn't matter. I closed the lid. I turned off the propane tank, the hiss of the gas dying with a soft sigh. I walked through the yard, around the side of the house, and to my car parked on the street. I didn't want to make a scene by going through the house. I was tired of scenes. My whole life felt like a scene I was expected to perform in, with lines someone else had written for me. The patient father, the doting grandfather, the quiet old man in the corner. I got into my Buick. The seat was worn in the shape of me. The air smelled of old leather and the faint, sweet scent of the pipe tobacco Mary always said she liked. I started the engine. It turned over with a low, reliable rumble. I had rebuilt this engine myself, piece by piece in my garage. Another story. I drove away from my son's house. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I knew what I would see. A nice house in a nice neighborhood, with a man inside who carried my blood, but not my heart. The drive home was quiet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Mary would have loved it. We used to just sit on the porch and watch the sky change. We didn't always have to talk. The stories were just there, in the silence between us. When I got home, the house was still and dark. It was too big for one person. Every room held a ghost, a memory, a story. I walked into the kitchen and turned on the small lamp over the sink. I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove. The click of the gas burner was loud in the silence. I spooned coffee grounds into the press. Strong, black, no sugar. While the water heated, I stood and looked at the wall calendar. It was from the local barbershop. Each month had a picture of a different classic car. July was a 1968 Ford Mustang. I'd own one just like it. Painted it candy apple red myself. The kettle began to whistle. A long, mournful sound. I poured the water over the grounds. I pushed the plunger down slowly. The aroma of the coffee filled the small space. It was a real smell. A smell that meant something. It wasn't anger I felt. I had been angry before. Anger is a hot, messy thing. This was different. This was clarity. It was the feeling you get when you've been working on a complex engine for hours and you finally find the one loose wire, the one clog valve. The problem becomes simple. The solution becomes clear. My son and his wife didn't see me. They saw utility, a free babysitter, a reliable source of $500 when the property taxes were due, a story to be curated for their friends. And my stories, the very fabric of my life, the lessons learned and the love earned, were dismissed as noise, as clutter. I sipped my coffee. It was hot and bitter. It tasted like the truth. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked a steady rhythm. It had been my father's. He brought it up from Alabama in the back of a truck, wrapped in his mother's quilts. Tick, tock, a story. Tick, tock, matter. The decision formed not as a thought, but as a settling, a weight shifting inside me, finding a new center of balance. I was done, not done with living, done with waiting, waiting for them to see me, waiting for a respect they were incapable of giving, waiting for a phone call that wasn't a request. I finished my coffee and rinsed the cup in the sink. I walked into my study. It was more of a small bedroom, really, but it was mine. The walls were lined with books, history, biographies, manuals on carpentry and auto repair. On the desk was a picture of Mary, taken on our wedding day. She was beautiful. Her smile was the truest thing I have ever known. Next to her picture was a stack of my old journals, leather-bound books filled with my looping cursive. I've been keeping them since I was a boy. My father had told me to. A man needs to know where he's been to know where he's going, he'd said. My stories. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and a good pen, the one with the heavy gold cap. I started a list. It was a simple list. A list of things to do. Number 1 was lawyer. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was cold. I made my coffee, the same ritual as the night before. It was an anchor. I dressed carefully. Not in my usual work jeans, but in my Sunday suit. Gray wool, starched white shirt, a dark blue tie. I polished my good leather shoes until I could see my face in them. My father taught me that. You can tell a man by his shoes, he'd say. I found the number in my old address book. Mr. Abernathy. A young man, but sharp. He'd handled the probate when Mary passed. He was respectful. He called me Mr. Williams. His office was downtown, in one of those new glass towers that scrape the clouds. It smelled sterile, like money and recycled air. Mr. Abernathy didn't look so young anymore. There was gray at his temples. He stood when I entered his office and shook my hand firmly. Mr. Williams, it's good to see you. Please have a seat. Can I get you some coffee? I've had my coffee, thank you, I said. I sat in the leather chair opposite his big, clean desk. There was a single picture on it. A woman and 2 little girls. He sat down. What can I do for you today? I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I was past the age of small talk. I need to make some changes, I said. To my will, and to my power of attorney. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He just nodded, his pen poised over a notepad. My son, Daniel Williams, is currently my executor and hold my durable power of attorney, I said. The words felt foreign, like describing a stranger. I want that revoked. Immediately, he raised an eyebrow just slightly. May I ask why? You may, I said. The reason is my own, he nodded again. Accepting it. That's what I was paying him for. Acceptance, not judgment. And who would you like to designate in his place? I thought of Marcus, but he was too young. It would put him in the middle, a war he didn't need to fight. For now, no one, I said. If the time comes, the court can appoint a professional. Until then, I am of sound mind and body. I'll make my own decisions, of course, Mr. Williams, and the will, I continued. I want to change the beneficiary. The house, the savings, the investments, everything, Who will be the new beneficiary? Not who, I said. What? I want to set up a foundation. A trust. I explained my idea. It had come to me in the quiet hours before dawn. An idea born of dismissal. If my stories didn't matter, then I would make them matter. I would turn them into something solid. Something that could not be ignored. He wrote it all down. We talked for over an hour. We discussed trusts, tax implications, the legal steps. He was thorough. When we were done, he had a list of his own. This will take a few days to draft, he said. I'll call you when the documents are ready for your signature. I stood up and shook his hand again. Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. It's my job, Mr. Williams. Walking out of that building, the sun felt warmer. The air felt cleaner. The first step was taken. The deadbolt was not just slid, it was locked. When I got home, the red light on my answering machine was blinking. 1, 2, 3. From messages. I pressed the play button. The first was Sarah. Her voice was tight with annoyance. Arthur, it's Sarah. Where did you go? You just left. The ribs were nearly burned. Call me Arthur. She only called me Arthur when she was irritated. I pressed delete. The machine word. The second was Daniel. Pop, pop. Hey, Sarah said you took off. Everything okay? Call me back. He sounded confused, like a child who had dropped his toy. Delete. The third was Sarah again. Arthur, seriously. People were asking where you went. It was embarrassing. What is going on with you? Delete. The fourth was Daniel. His voice was harder now. Dad, call us back. This is ridiculous. We're worried. They were worried about the disruption to their day. Worried about the narrative they had to spin for their friends. They were not worried about me. I deleted it. Then I unplugged the answering machine from the wall. The blinking red light went dark. The silence was a relief. My next stop was the bank. It was an old-fashioned place, with marble floors and high ceilings. I knew the manager, a woman named Miss Peterson. Her father and I used to play dominoes down at the barber shop. I walked up to her desk. She smiled when she saw me. Mr. Williams. A pleasure. What can we do for you? I need to make some changes to my accounts, Carol, I said. We went into her office. I had a checking account and a savings account. Daniel's name was on both of them. For emergencies, he had said years ago, after Mary passed. It had seemed sensible at the time. I want to remove Daniel Williams from my accounts, I stated plainly. And I'd like to open a new account, a trust account, that only Mr. Abernathy and I can access for now. She didn't ask why. She knew me. She knew my son. Her expression was professional, but there was a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Of course, Arthur, she said, her voice soft. She got the paperwork. I signed my name. The ink was dark and permanent on the crisp paper. Another lock turned. That afternoon, I worked in my garage. It was my sanctuary. It smelled of sawdust and motor oil and time. My tools hung neatly on a pegboard wall, each one in its place. Many of them had been my father's. There was a heavy wooden toolbox in the corner. I had built it myself, dovetail joints and a brass handle. Inside were the best of my tools. The perfectly balanced hammer. The set of socket wrenches I had bought piece by piece when I was in the service. The hand plane that could shave a sliver of wood so thin you could see through it. I had always intended to give it to Daniel. I had pictured the moment. Handing it over. A legacy. But a legacy, like a story, is only valuable if the recipient understands its worth. To Daniel, these are just old tools. He preferred to buy new things, disposable things. I opened the box. I took each tool out one by one. I wiped them down with an oiled cloth. I felt their weight, their history. I placed them back in the box, not for him, but for safekeeping. I closed the lid and pushed it under my workbench. Out of sight. Then I went back into the house. In the hallway, there was a large, framed photograph. It was a family portrait taken about 5 years ago. I was in the middle, on a chair, with Daniel and Sarah standing behind me, their hands on my shoulders. Marcus and his sister sat at my feet. We were all smiling, or our mouths were shaped like smiles. My eyes, I now saw, looked tired. I took the photograph off the wall. The hook left a small, pale scar on the wallpaper. I carried it into the study and leaned it against the wall, its face turned inward. The silence in the house was deeper now. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a clean silence, a silence of my own making. The phone began to ring that evening. I had unplugged the machine, but not the phone itself. I let it ring. and ring, and ring. I sat in my armchair, the one with the worn leather that Mary loved, and I listened to a record. John Coltrane. The music filled the room, a story told without a single word. The next few days followed a rhythm. My rhythm. Morning coffee, a walk around the neighborhood, tending to the small vegetable garden in my backyard. The phone would ring. Text would arrive on the simple flip phone I kept. I learned to ignore the buzzing. One evening, I read a text. It was from Daniel. Dad, I went to the bank to get cash for the caterer for Sarah's garden party, and my card was declined. They said my name isn't on the account anymore. What is going on? This is not funny. I deleted it. Not replied. Deleted. Another one arrived an hour later. Are you punishing us? For what? Because we said your stories are old? Is that it? You're being childish. I saw it then, so clearly. He didn't see my action as a consequence of his disrespect. He saw it as a punishment he didn't deserve. In his world, my resources were his right, and my feelings were an inconvenience. The next day, there was a knock at the door. A loud, insistent banging. I was in the kitchen, slicing tomatoes from my garden. They were warm from the sun. I looked through the peephole. It was Daniel. His face was red and pinched. I did not open the door. I stood there on my side of the solid oak door I had hung myself, and I listened to him knock. I listened to him call my name. I listened to his frustration mount. Dad, I know you're in there. Open this door. We need to talk. We had nothing to talk about. He had already said everything that needed to be said. Eventually, he gave up. I heard his car door slam and the squeal of tires as he sped away. I went back to my tomatoes. I salted them lightly and ate them standing at the counter, the juice running down my chin. They tasted of the earth. They tasted of my own labor. They tasted of freedom. A few days later, Mr. Abernathy called. The documents were ready. I put on my suit again. I drove to his office. The papers were laid out on his conference table. There was a stack of them. I read each one carefully. The language was dense and legal, but the meaning was simple. I was taking back my life. I signed my name over and over. My hand was steady. Each signature felt like a stone being laid in a new foundation. When I was done, Mr. Abernathy notarized the last page with a heavy, satisfying stamp. It's done, Mr. Williams, he said. The trust is established. Your power of attorney is officially in your own hands. Your will reflects your new wishes. Thank you, I said. It felt inadequate. On the way out, his secretary handed me a packet. Mr. Abernathy thought you might need these, she said. It was a list of locksmiths and home security companies. I had already changed the locks myself, but I appreciated the thought. He understood. That weekend, I went to the barber shop. It was a Saturday morning ritual. The place smelled of talcum powder and conversation. My barber, a man named George, had been cutting my hair for 30 years. He knew the shape of my head better than I did. Arthur, he said with a nod as I sat in his chair. You look different, do I? Yeah, he said, draping the cloth around my neck. You look taller. I just grunted. We didn't need to talk much. He worked his clippers with an expert hand. Around us, men argued about baseball, politics, and the best way to smoke a brisket. It was a symphony of stories. Stories that mattered. As I was leaving, a young man held the door open for me. It was Marcus, my grandson. He looked hesitant, worried. Pop, Pop, he said, his voice quiet. Marcus, I said, can I talk to you for a minute? We walked outside and sat on a bench by the bus stop. The sun was warm. He didn't look at me. He looked at his own hands. They were big like mine. I heard what my mom and dad said. He said, so quietly I could barely hear him over the traffic. At the barbecue. I was in the kitchen getting a drink. I waited. It wasn't right. Pop, Pop, he said, his voice thick with a shame that wasn't his to carry. I'm sorry. I looked at this boy, this young man, who was my blood. In him, I saw the decency and respect his parents had misplaced. It wasn't your place to be sorry for, son, I told him. But they're my parents. And what they said, it was just wrong. Your stories. I like your stories. He finally looked at me. His eyes, Mary's eyes, were clear and honest. I remember the one you told me about how you and Grandma met at that dance, he said. And the one about your first car, the Mustang. You said you learned every nut and bolt on that thing. A warmth spread through my chest, a feeling I'd thought was gone for good. It was the feeling of being seen. They mattered to me, he said, his voice firm now. I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. That matters to me, Marcus. More than you know. We sat there for a while, not saying anything. Just a grandfather and his grandson, sitting on a bench in the sun. You want to come over to the house? I asked. I've got some dominoes. His face lit up. Yeah, I'd like that. We spent the afternoon at my kitchen table, the sharp crack of the dominoes on the wood, the only sound for long stretches. He beat me twice. I let him. When he was leaving, he paused at the door. Mom and Dad they're really mad. Pop. They keep saying you're being cruel. It's not about them anymore. Marcus, I said. It's about me, he nodded. A slow, solemn gesture of understanding that was far beyond his years. Okay, can I still come over? Your key still works? I said. I hadn't changed his key. He smiled, a real smile. Okay, see you later, Pop. See you later, son. Marcus's visit solidified my resolve. My next step was the biggest one. It was the reason I had established the trust. I had started writing things down, not just in my journals, but on my legal pad. I wrote down the stories. The story of my father leaving the farm in Alabama with nothing but a cardboard suitcase and a belief in something better. The story of my mother working 2 jobs to make sure I had books to read. I wrote about my time in Vietnam. Not the fighting, but the quiet moments. The faces of the men I served with. The smell of the rain. The letters from Mary that kept me sane. I wrote about building my house, board by board. About the day Daniel was born, the impossible smallness of his hands. About the 52 years I had with my wife, a love story that was my life's great masterpiece. The pages piled up. It was all there. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly. It was my life, and it mattered. I called an old friend, a man named Ellis who used to be a reporter for the local paper before he retired. I asked him to read what I had written. He came over a few days later. He sat in my armchair and read for hours, sipping the coffee I made him. When he was finished, he looked at me, and his eyes were wet. Arthur, he said, his voice raspy. This is more than just stories. This is history. This is the story of a black man in America in the 20th century. People need to read this. He knew a man, he said, a literary agent in New York. He made a call. Things moved faster than I ever expected. The agent loved it. He sent it to a publisher. They loved it. They offered me an advance. The number was so large, I had to ask the agent to repeat it twice. It was more money than I had ever seen. I told Mr. Abernathy to put it all in the trust. The name for the trust was simple, the Mary and Arthur Williams Foundation. Its purpose was also simple, to build a community center in our old neighborhood, a place for kids to go after school, a place with a workshop where young men and women could learn a trade, learn to build things with their hands, a place with a library where stories were kept and cherished, a place where people mattered. The sale of the book, My Life Story, was in the papers. It was a small article, but it was there. That's what brought Daniel and Sarah to my door again. This time I was expecting them. I saw their car pull up. I opened the door before they could knock. They stood on my porch, looking stunned. Daniel was holding a copy of the newspaper. What is this? He demanded, shaking the paper. Local man's memoir fetches 6-figure deal. What did you do? I told my stories, I said calmly. Sarah pushed past him. Your stories? You sold our family's privacy? Without asking us. They're my stories, Sarah, I said. My voice was even. I felt no anger. Only a great, vast distance from them. You said yourself they didn't matter. Her face flushed. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I asked. She sputtered, unable to answer. Daniel stepped forward. His anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading look I had never seen on him. Dad, pop the money. Is it true? What are you going to do with it? I saw the hope in his eyes. The hope that this was all some grand, theatrical gesture. That now I would relent. That I would give him the money, and everything would go back to the way it was. The money is not for you, Daniel, I said. What do you mean it's not for me? I'm your son. It's my inheritance. An inheritance has to be earned, I said. Not with money. With respect. With love. I look him in the eye. My son. The man who had laughed at the idea of my life having value. I was at the barbecue, I said, my voice dropping low. I was sitting 10 feet away from you. I heard what Sarah said about my stories. And Daniel. I heard you laugh. The color drained from his face. He finally understood. Not the hurt he had caused, perhaps, but the finality of my decision. He understood that he had been seen. He had been heard. I didn't mean it like that, he stammered. It doesn't matter how you meant it, I said. It only matters what you did. I stepped back into my house. There is nothing more to say, I told them, and I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently, and I turned the deadbolt. The click was the last word in our conversation. The next year was a year of building. I sold a house. It was too big, too full of ghosts. I was ready to let rest. I sold it to a young family with 2 small children. I liked the sound of their laughter in the rooms. I moved into a small, clean apartment downtown. It had a balcony that overlooked the city. I could see the library from my window. Most of my days were spent at the construction site. I had my old hard hat on, and I watched the community center rise from the dirt. I talked with the foreman. I watched the young carpenters, and sometimes I'd show them an old trick my father had taught me. They listened. They called me Mr. Williams. They treated me with a simple, profound respect. Marcus came to visit me at my new apartment. He helped me unpack my books. He loved the view. We still played dominoes. He was starting college in the fall, studying to be an architect. He said he wanted to build things that mattered. I made sure his tuition was paid for, straight from the trust. It was the only part of the money that went to family. He had earned it. My book was published. It was called The Weight of a Hammer. The cover was a picture of my hands, holding my father's old hammer. It sold well. People wrote me letters. They told me my story reminded them of their own fathers, their own grandfathers. They said thank you. The day the community center opened was a bright, clear day in September. The mayor was there. The press was there. The building was beautiful. It was made of brick and glass and warm, polished wood. Inside, you could hear the happy noise of children in the library and the buzz of saws in the workshop. There was a bronze plaque next to the front door. It read, The Mary and Arthur Williams Community Center. Built on the belief that every story matters, I stood to the side, watching the crowd. I didn't give a speech. The building was my speech. I felt a sense of peace so deep it felt like the foundation of the building itself. It wasn't happiness. Happiness is a fleeting thing. This was solidity. This was wholeness. I had taken the scattered, dismissed pieces of my life, and I had built something that would last. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at my apartment. The return address was Daniel's. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 3 days. Finally, I opened it. It was long. It was full of words like sorry and regret, and I understand now he wrote that he had read my book. He said he had cried. He asked if he could see me. He said he wanted to try to be a better son. I read the letter, and I put it in a drawer. I did not reply. Not yet. Forgiveness is a complicated thing. Maybe it would come. Maybe it wouldn't. But it would be on my terms. In my time, the door was no longer locked and bolted. It was perhaps cracked open just a little. But I was not standing by it, waiting. I had my own life to live, my own coffee to brew, my own view of the city to enjoy. This morning, I woke up and the sun was streaming through my window. I made my coffee. I sat on my balcony and I watched the city wake up. I thought about my father and my mother and my Mary. I thought about the boy I was and the man I had become. My stories don't just matter. They are all I am. They are all any of us are. And I wouldn't trade them for anything. My new routine is simple. It brings me a quiet joy I haven't felt in years, maybe ever. I wake with the sun, not an alarm clock. The light tells me it's time. I don't rush. I move at the speed of my own body, which is slower now, but more deliberate. Each movement has a purpose. The coffee ritual remains. It's the first story I tell myself each day. The scoop of dark rounds, the slow pour of hot water, the 5 minutes I let it steep. It's a meditation. In those 5 minutes, the world is just me and the promise of that first bitter, hot sip. Some days, I walk down to the center. I don't announce myself. I just walk in. I like to sit in the library section and watch the kids. They pull books from the shelves, their faces scrunched in concentration. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, was reading a book about Harriet Tubman last week. She was so lost in the story, she didn't see me sitting there. I felt a connection to her, an invisible thread stretching across generations. My father's journey north wasn't so different. A different kind of underground railroad. Sometimes I go into the workshop. The smell of fresh-cut pine is better than any cologne. A young woman named Keisha runs it. She's a master carpenter. She calls me the legend. I just laugh. I watch her teach a group of teenagers how to use a lathe. They're clumsy at first, but she's patient. She shows them how to respect the tool, how to listen to the wood. I see myself in her patience. I see my father. The legacy isn't in the blood. It's in the work. It's in the teaching. I don't own a car anymore. I sold the Buick to a collector who promised to take good care of it. I walk or take the bus. It forces me to see the city, to see the people. I see the cracks in the sidewalk and the new murals painted on old brick walls. I notice things I never saw from behind a pane of glass. Marcus comes for dinner every Sunday. I cook. Nothing fancy. A roast chicken, some greens, mashed potatoes. We talk. He tells me about his classes, about a girl he likes, about his dreams of designing buildings that feel like home. He asks me questions, not just about the old days, but about today. He asks for my opinion on his designs. He listens to my answers. He sees me not as a relic, but as a resource, a living library. He told me his father, Daniel, asks about me. All the time. Marcus is careful. He doesn't take sides. He just reports the facts. Dad's going to therapy, he told me last week. Mom is too. I just nodded. That's good, I said, and I meant it. I hope they find what they're looking for. I hope they find a way to see each other, to hear each other. I hope they learn that a family, like a house, needs a strong foundation. And a foundation is built on more than money and appearances. Daniel's letter is still in the drawer. I haven't taken it out again. I know what it says. But the words on the page are less important than the actions that follow. Words are easy. Building is hard. He has a lot of building to do. I've started a new journal. The pages are crisp and white. My handwriting is a little shakier now, but the words still come. I'm not writing about the past anymore. I'm writing about today. About the taste of a fresh tomato from the community garden at the center. About the sound of a child's laughter in the library. About the quiet satisfaction of a day lived on my own terms. My life is not a grand, dramatic story anymore. It's a series of small, quiet moments. A shared meal with my grandson. A nod from a neighbor on the bus. The weight of a new book in my hands. These are the stories that matter now. They are smaller, yes, but they are mine, and they are enough. Last Tuesday, I was sitting on a bench outside the center when a woman came and sat next to me. She was young, maybe in her early 30s, with a tired look in her eyes. Her son was playing on the small patch of grass nearby. "It's a beautiful place, isn't it?" she said, more to herself than to me. "I think so," I replied. "My boy, Jamal, he comes here every day after school," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "He's in the workshop program. He's making a spice rack. For me. He's so proud of it." She looked at me. "You know, I work 2 jobs. I used to worry about him all the time, those hours between school and when I get home. Now I know he's here. He's safe. He's learning something. Thank God for whoever built this place." I just nodded. I didn't tell her who I was. It didn't matter. The building was the name. The work was the legacy. "Yes," I said. "Thank God." We sat in comfortable silence, watching her son try to catch a grasshopper. The sun was warm on my face. The quiet hum of the city was all around us. I felt a deep, abiding sense of rightness. A feeling of a debt paid, a promise kept. My father worked his fingers to the bone so I could have a better life. I worked my fingers to the bone so my son could have a better life. But I had forgotten the most important part of the lesson. The life has to have meaning. It has to have purpose beyond just acquiring more. Daniel and Sarah got lost in the acquiring. They forgot about the meaning. Perhaps they'll find their way back. I hope they do, for their sake, for Marcus's sake. But my journey is on a different path now. I'm not looking back. I'm looking out, at the city, at the people, at the future being built one story at a time, inside the walls of a place born from a quiet, final click of a deadbolt sliding home. It was the sound of an ending, but it was also the sound of a beginning. My beginning. If this story moved you, if it felt true in some corner of your own heart, share it. Someone out there, sitting in a flimsy lawn chair, feeling invisible, needs to know they're not alone. They need to know that their stories matter. And they need to know that it is never, ever too late to pick up the hammer and build a new life for yourself.